So I'll invite our panelists to come up. Let's see, that's Zach, Caroline, Brad, and Jim. And PJ is gonna join us remotely. Hello, PJ.
Good afternoon, everybody.
So Casey and I are going to lead or help with a facilitated conversation. And let me just.
So PJ, you can hear us okay, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. You're coming in loud and clear.
So we're going to start by asking each of our panelists, and PJ, I'll ask you to go first, only because to be sure while we have technology and have you connected, to give us just a couple of minute overview of their journey with immersive learning tools and technologies in their particular fire academy or training environment. Now, PJ's with the Connecticut Fire Academy, Caroline with Oklahoma, Brad with Illinois, Jim with Illinois, Brad with Utah, and Zach with Indiana. So we have 5 very different states. They have 5 different delivery models, but they're all engaged in statewide delivery of fire service training for volunteers, for career, the full scale of classes and whatnot. So they have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and perspectives. And PJ, 2 years ago at our File Summit, did a presentation about how they embarked on looking at hybrid learning, which has an immersive learning piece, and how they utilized it to reduce the amount of in-classroom time listening to an instructor and free up time to go out into the drill yard and further refine their performance skills and what the impact of that was. So I'm hopeful that today PJ will give us a little update on that as well. So PJ?
Yeah, Ken, thank you very much, and good. I think it's still morning for everybody there. Good morning, and I apologize for not being able to be with you all in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you at least virtually. So I'll speak on immersive training for the Connecticut Fire Academy in 3 different directions. First, what Ken was just mentioning regarding our, what I like to call basically the flipped classroom, where we are now utilizing interactive lectures for all of our lessons for our recruit program, instead of those typical point-and-click PowerPoint lessons. And we looked at the generational learner and the average age of all of our recruits and how they actually learn. And we quickly figured out and realized that they don't learn the way most of us have in this lecture type format. So we've kind of flipped our model, and we used and I call it's not a true flipped classroom, but what we do is we require all the recruits to utilize the interactive lectures. We currently use Public Safety Group, Jones and Bartlett, for our FAR 1, FAR 2 hazmat curriculum. They use the interactive lectures, and then we bring them into the classroom. And that classroom session is more just an overview or a review of the high points or the key pieces of those lessons, make sure that we answer their questions, and then we go outside. We have decreased our classroom presentations now. We're up to a little bit over 40 hours of less classroom time, and all of those hours have been dedicated to hands-on training out on the drill yard. The piece that I was concerned about when I presented this originally is our test scores, right? We still need to make sure that we're providing the recruits with the information so they can be what we like to say, jump seat ready when they go back to their departments. But we also have to make sure that they were still passing the certification exams. And I'm happy to report now, 4 classes, the scores continue to rise. Every single class since we've started this model, the test scores have increased every single class. So the concern that I had was those scores would drop, or we would not be meeting those certification limits or those certification exam benchmarks, but we're meeting and exceeding that. So not only are we meeting and exceeding in the certification testing, the recruits are leaving with more hands-on training and skill development. So that's a win all the way around. The second piece I'll mention is immersive training for pump simulation. We purchased the FAAC pump simulator, and we've been moving that across the state. We've been using it in our basic or entry-level pump operations class. But we've also been doing skill maintenance, I like to call it, where we'll go to a department across the state, we'll move the pump simulator into their department, and they will rotate companies through utilizing that simulator So it decreases their downtime, increases their education, and they're not taking companies out of service for that training. And we received overwhelmingly positive feedback utilizing that simulator, all the way from entry-level pump operators to seasoned and well-experienced pump operators. So that immersive training with the pump simulator has been received very, very well, where I would predict within the next couple of years, I'd like to say next year, but financially it wouldn't happen, but within the next couple of years, we'll probably be looking to buy at least a second one that we dedicate just to our certification division, that we can now incorporate that to all of our pump certification testing, so we really add that consistency in that piece of our testing. The last piece is the Flame VR simulator. The Flame VR simulator, it was the piece that I was probably most excited about and anticipated having the easiest rollout, but yet it's proved to be the hardest. And when I say the hardest or the most difficult, it's from an instructor perspective. It's been very difficult for us to get a good cadre of instructors who are as energetic, motivated, and excited about it as I am, and to really dive in and learn it from top to bottom, and have that ability to go off-site and utilize that simulator. While I finally found one instructor about 5 or 6 months ago who has done just that, in his short time, he's really advancing that Flame simulator, right? We're moving it from just a nice game piece where we can showcase the fire service for recruitment events, or to just highlight what VR can do, to an actual educational component. He's working with the staff from Flame, and I believe Evan Wing is there today because he sent me some harassing text messages, so Evan, thank you. And he's working with Evan and his staff to develop scripts for each scenario that's built within their system. I know they haven't done one for every scenario that's pre-built, and kind of like checklists or JPRs. So it's not just here, put on this VR, and here, let's go through this. There's actually a guided process and a script for the instructor and checkboxes to make sure that we're hitting specific training criteria, so we can now use it from something nice and something fun to an actual training component. Last week was the first time that we used it with a large group of students. We actually use it within our recruit program. So our recruit program is 15 weeks. They graduate next week, so they can, they pretty much completed all the requirements. We waited till after their live fire education just to see how it would go. And we had amazing feedback from the recruits on they were learning things that they didn't realize they were doing maybe wrong, or ways that they can actually do it better from their training here at the Academy to the VR, because it can be stopped, it can be paused. We can correct them on the fly, where we always can't do that in those live fire scenarios. So we are now finally getting it over the hump to provide that VR simulator as an educational tool versus just something that's great for recruitment and for those fairs, and to try to suck people into the fire service. And I would anticipate within the next year, I hope that we can pull in a couple additional instructors and really advance that program. But we're finally getting some momentum on that piece. And the number one issue that we had was really finding the instructor who was kind of at that right generation to really embrace that technology, see the pros, and push that out to the Connecticut Fire Service.
Thank you, PJ. And Caroline, could you share what's going on in Oklahoma?
Well, currently, a long time ago, we started out with the blended learning. I think that was about 15 years ago, which is a variation of a flipped classroom. Oklahoma's very remote, so our initiation, or our goal as a state training agency at OSU is to bring the training to them. The problem with Oklahoma is the infrastructure was not there to provide sound Wi-Fi. The infrastructure wasn't there for the educational piece of technology. The end user didn't know how to use it per se, my instructors. So we went through that whole loop, insert, repeat, as we started those blended learnings. And it was very successful at the end. What we learned when we started was you can't just toss out the blended learning piece or the online learning piece without having checks and balances with the instructor. So in our blended learning, you cannot go to skills day until you've completed the chapter readings and the exams. Because they would just push through those and they wouldn't get those concepts, and then you get them on skills day and they're not ready. And most of these are out in the field. So when you're out in the field and dealing with those things, you have to do a lot of education, and your instructors have to have that communication with them, even though it's a blended learning and online platform. So we introduced that probably about 3 or 4 years in, and our test scores went up dramatically. Now we really have that system down, so we can lock through. We do about 55 academies in my state annually. 45 of them are in a blended learning platform. So I think that is one piece that we do. Our flashover chambers, our immersive extrication pieces. We have 2 props for that. The flashover chamber we use a lot for basic fire behavior and to show extremes, and we actually put them in the burned and do it in a controlled environment. It's not necessarily so technologically driven, but it is very, very useful to show them fire behavior as it goes. Slow it down. You don't have to fry them. You don't have to heat it up so much, but show them the evolution of it. And I think that's where we've stopped trying to do the big flashy technological pieces. We break it down into small incremental things that we can show them in a safe environment that allows them to get those concepts at the core base. It's our philosophy that your department's gonna teach you your SOPs. We're gonna teach you your basic concepts that you need to survive and go home safe. And so as far as the broader reach of what we do, is a lot of it is on the basic levels. The basic firefighter 1 all the way to fire 2, we're gonna hone in on those core concepts. And that's what we're looking for and what we look at when we do our simulators. We recently have just got an extrication simulator. Because, cars, for those of you who do extrication, cars is your thing. And cutting up a Prius is not the same as cutting up a Ford LTD. It's just not. And so we bought a little prop and we do some specific metal pieces in it so everybody gets the same cut. So when we do our testing, it's the same piece. So we're looking at that in simulation as well and in technology. Sometimes it's not it's an immersive learning isn't always VR, AR, or those types of things. Sometimes it's a metal prop out there and I'm gonna cut it the same way. And you're simulating that car. But those are just as important in our line of work as the high-end piece. So that's kind of where we're at. We've kind of stepped back a little bit from the big, huge, technologically immersion type things and gone more toward the practical and the hands-on prefabbed simulators so that our recruits can get some basic training and get that basic feel for it before they go back and do the SOPs. So that's kind of where Oklahoma's at.
Jim?
So I'm gonna say what she said and he said, sort of. My journey here started long ago in a state far away. I will argue that we have always had immersive learning in the fire service. We've had acquired structures, we've had pulled real hose, we've flowed real water, we've cut apart cars, we've forced doors. All of that's immersive learning. And we can replicate that, we can do that as long as we had stuff to burn, whether it was in the tower or in a house burn. But how do I get volume? And my department before I came here had 400 people, 3 shifts, 12 stations, and it took me 24 sessions in our 9-week training plan to get 80% of the people, and then there were 20% of the people I had to make up somehow because they were on furlough, vacation, sick leave, or something else. And how do you get consistent training for everybody that way? And we had to find new ways to do that. And like JP and or PJ and Caroline, we jumped into the LMS and the Moodle and online training and how to do that, and started down there. And it focused a lot on fundamental skills, but also on a lot of EMS stuff. And then we had the opportunity to get a human simulator for the paramedic training that, you know, you've all seen them now. They breathe, they talk, they seize, their fingertips turn blue, and you can push drugs, and they will physiologically respond to whatever you do. And that was a huge stretch, and it may have been a stretch too far, but then I started to talk to the university in Wisconsin, and we collaborated, and I got simulation experts. And then I came here, and we did all the things I did before, but like Caroline, I've got a state with 45,000 firefighters, 75% are volunteer or combination departments, from Metropolis to South Beloit to Quincy to Chicago, and we're all over the state, and you saw some of the stuff out there. We have 150 pieces of rolling stock that we can move wherever we need for whatever the class is. Extrication tools, collapse rescue, rope rescue, confined space, all of that kind of stuff to create that virtual environment. We expanded the online training and did the flipped classroom. We deliver a shipping container at each of the practical sites for our Firefighter One program with all the equipment they need, short of a engine, but they also included a portable pump. If the engine wasn't local, we could still flow water and do those kind of things. Roof props that allow us to change the pitch and move those around the state. As you see on the grounds, we have LP props and various structures to create simulation there. And how do we do more? We're in the cold environment in a good share of the state, maybe not all of it, but a good share of the state, where from November to March we have freezing conditions. How do I flow water? We have a winter fire school where last year and this year we've flowed over 200,000 gallons of water without flowing a drop of real water in the pump simulators. Driving simulators, how can I take drivers and put them at night in a snowstorm on ice with a tire failure and all those weird things that an evil instructor can come up with that I could never do in real life. How can I let you cavitate the pump and lose your prime and do those kind of things? Virtual simulators, electronic technology. Then we got into the flame simulator, like PJ talked about, and we're still trying to figure out how to truly integrate that for the crawl, novice, walk, competent, run, proficient, expert kind of things. And it's all tied in with how do I develop my instructional staff to truly understand the technology, appreciate the technology when, well, I just want to take them in the burn room on day one of the academy and they'll figure it out. Well, is that really the best learning model based on learning practices of the students to set them up for success? So that's how we kind of got here, and then we started to work in the immersive learning realm with campus and we're talking about virtual environments for fire investigation and virtual environments for collapse rescue and those kind of things. So that's kind of my journey.
So mine is a lot like what you've heard already from my colleagues here. I think a couple of things I would just maybe add to it is, as Jim said earlier, we've been doing immersive learning at the Utah Fire Rescue Academy since I was a fire officer, back as a firefighter in the 90s. Frankly, for us, our immersive learning environment at the Utah Fire Rescue Academy really started to flourish back in the early mid 2000s. Actually, I was a fire chief in our state, and a bunch of our fire chiefs saw a need for, as fire chiefs, we saw a need for kind of a refinement, a fundamentally sound command training center system, if you will. Those of you who've been on the job can relate to this. If you hear a fire officer arrive on a scene, you generally can tell whether it's going to go to crap or it's going to go well based on what you hear on the voice, on the radio. And as a fire chief, I remember hearing that, and I could tell when Captain McElreath was on, and I could say he was in control. We had a structure fire. You could tell that things were going to be okay. He had his stuff together. Immersive environment. Our firefighters, and I'm struggling with this with the flame thing, trying to get them to understand how this technology can help us with the fundamentals. And that's where our focus has been. Will continue to be, frankly. We're all in on immersive learning because you can't replicate some of those things other than in an environment where you can throw some of the hiccups they're going to get, but also have them practice to be fundamentally sound in those respects. So that's our journey.
My name is Zach Matthews. I'm with the Indiana Fire Academy. My background is a little bit different than everybody else up here. What I'm about to tell you, I'm going to lose all credibility with you and then spend the rest of my time trying to build it back up. But I entered public safety as a wildlife enforcement officer, so police officer, before I got into the fire academy. But I was also a wildland firefighter. That's kind of our culture in Indiana, is both wildlife enforcement and fire warden at the same time. So when I was first exposed to immersive learning on the wildland firefighting side, it was through task books. Probably some of you remember the task book concepts. But I was put right in the training environment on a wildland fire, complex fire, whether it was Idaho, Washington State, Wyoming, Montana. That was my exposure on the fire side, was that incident command system with a trainer right there doing the job. So it was very immersive. On the law enforcement side, one of my first exposures to that immersive learning technology was a system called FATS. And it was kind of a shooting system that resembled the ball return from a bowling alley, where the balls come. It's that big unit. It was often on a military base. That used CDs the size of vinyl records. I don't know if you remember those old
Laser discs.
Yes, those old systems.
Laser discs.
Yeah.
That's fancy.
Yeah, and so what it meant was that we had to travel in groups because it wasn't mobile, it wasn't available to everybody, and that meant a crowd of officers was standing around you. And I can tell you the narrative that would go through my head, along with everybody else, if we were honest, was please let me pass this without embarrassing myself in front of everybody else. That was the highest order of my learning in that environment. It wasn't about being proficient at that skill. Your handgun was even attached by a cable to a big CO2 cylinder so it would simulate recoil. Nothing about it was really real at all. So that was the beginning stages for me in that technology. And it was interesting when I was invited to be on the panel. I was thinking a lot about what I would present. And just 2 days ago for Mother's Day, my daughter brought her boyfriend and some of his friends from college home. They're all sitting around and talking about gaming. And they were talking about how the Wii system was the best system that they could be using right now. Now they had Xbox, they had whatever the latest technology is with the greatest graphics. My son has those, and it's amazing. But they liked the Wii because they would go to a pawn shop, they go to a thrift store, they could buy it. So it was on a college kid's funding, which sound very much like Fire Academy, to be honest. Limited budgets, right? They could easily get it. Every dorm room had it. So if you were into surfing that day or bowling or whatever it was, it didn't matter whose dorm room you're in. Again, does that not sound like a Fire Academy, right? And then as well, it was transferable. In other words, it was more realistic, right? You're trying to do ping pong, you're doing, archery, nothing crazy, right? So I was sitting there listening to these, I was kind of eavesdropping on this conversation thinking, wow, this is the illities that we were just discussing, right? Not to mention, think about the durability and reliability of the Wii system. They're using used equipment, cast out stuff that people no longer wanted that's still reliable. And I was thinking, isn't that our goal? Isn't that a goal of what we're trying to do here? So I'm going to contrast that a little bit with a failure that we had in Indiana, and that is our driving simulator trailer. And it's bought from a previous administration, I should say that, but they bought that trailer without really any curriculum in mind at all. It was bought on a grant. It was seen as a success because the grant purchased it, but no curriculum at all. And again, I'll talk about our failure very openly. We've really only used it for more demonstrative purposes at this point, and not so much in a classroom. One, it can do sets and reps, but you can also create learning scars. And in that, you can drive it off the road. It can be in snowy environment and so on. That's probably more of our expert level in the rubric that we're looking at, right? But most instructors want to use it in the driver operator course, which is probably the worst place to be using that technology. Because again, the instructor, and I think you even said evil instructor would obviously want to put the student through something entertaining, right? So they were putting them through more advanced skills, and even though they were maybe a beginner or a novice. So here the trailer was mobile, it was purchased on a grant, so it was affordable, but it wasn't really accessible in the way that we're thinking if we overlay the programs and the products that Ken's been talking about. So product is more linear, right? And that's what the technology folks in the room are talking about, linear. Like it can do this, then this, then this. But people are more narrative. So that's the programs, right? People are a lot more narrative. And that's what the instructors, and again, we kind of bounced back and forth in our dialogue earlier between evaluating and training. And we do that in the fire service. Can I say I'm in the fire service now, but we bounce back and forth in that conversation. We kind of did earlier, except Bob. Bob was very rigid. It's evaluation, right? It's evaluation. But the rest of us kind of bounce back and forth. And I think what we're really seeing is narrative concepts versus linear concepts. And we should probably be thinking about that in Indiana when it comes to that trailer. We thought about it in a linear way. We buy it, it comes with a program, we can roll it out. But people are narrative in our learning. And that's how Indiana failed, that we did not think about it from that curriculum standpoint and how the learner learns before we get to that evaluation piece. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share my story.
All right. Before I have some questions for the panel, I'd like to invite the audience. You've been listening all morning and you have some thoughts, but these are folks who are out here in the trenches. You heard your story. They've had failures, they've had successes, they have works in progress. What questions do you have for them about their experience and how it relates to what we're talking about? Or more importantly, how it relates to maybe a problem you're trying to solve or a challenge that you're facing and you're trying to find a solution to? Chief.
Yeah, PJ, I got a question for you. If you can hear me okay, I'll try to speak up. When you talked about the Flame VR simulator, difficulty getting instructors on board with teaching it, but then you found someone. What was the, if you could characterize the person that you found, and maybe we can look for that similar type of person when we're doing stuff. What skills did they have that made them understand it and then be willing to push it forward?
I went for the best solution I always have in the fire service: find somebody busy and ask them. Basically, it was a younger instructor, and I say younger, he's probably in his mid-40s, who I already have identified that has some doesn't have technology challenges, but he's that guy who's always interested in learning something different. He's not that type of instructor who's happy doing what he's doing. He's always looking for more responsibility and to learn more about the fire service. When I first brought the concept to him, he was like, I don't know if that's for me. You know, that VR stuff is kind of for the younger generation. I'm not a gamer. And I told him, I said, listen, I'm not looking for a gamer. I'm looking for somebody who doesn't have bias towards this, good or bad, to truly look at this from top to bottom and figure out how to make it better for the Connecticut Fire Service. So I kind of challenged him a little bit, and he dove in, and he ended up being the right one so far. It hasn't been always easy for him because technology is technology, and it's challenging for many different people. But it was that guy who was interested in doing more and learning something different. It necessarily wasn't VR specific. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
And to the rest of the panel, when you've been implementing your programs and you want to look for that instructor cadre, that early adapter, what have you been looking for? You heard what PJ found it look for. Have you had a similar experience? Who did you find? What were their capabilities, and what can you share with the audience?
I think that in Oklahoma, there's three things that I've got to have before we even consider a program. I got to have a champion. And this is the person who is living, breathing, eating, they're dreaming about this particular subject, they're on fire about it. And they are hard to find. But once you find that one, the success of your program typically goes right along with it. Because he's so bought into it, or they're so bought into that, they're championing that particular subject, whether it's rescue or whether it's fire or even technology as it's embraced within it in immersion. So I'm always looking for a champion, I'm looking for funding, and I'm also looking for how does this meet the need, and is there a specific need in the fire world or in the emergency response world at the time. Oklahoma, we have a lot of natural disasters, so we had a huge need for swift water. So we found us a champion, and we found some funding, and now we have a really outstanding water program. And they're out there. You have to reach out within your networks, within the service. I'm fortunate. I've been in Oklahoma for 30 years in this particular position, so I'm a known quantity. And champions come to me, typically, is what it amounts to. If they're on fire about something, you need to talk to her. She'll get you going, if there's a real need for it. And we've been able to find that as long as it meets those three concepts. Now, I have tons of programs out there that, we're missing a funding piece, or we haven't found that guy yet. We're kind of looking for it, but we haven't found the guy. And you can't give it to, we also, in order for it to be a successful program, I use a span of control as well. No more than 5 programs. No more than 5 individual classes can any one individual handle. Because if you get past that spread, something's falling. Because of our volume and the way we conduct training programs, if you get much past 5, they can't stay up with the cycles, they can't stay up with the standards for all of the programs and the bandwidth. So you get your sub-coordinators within it. And that's how you have to look at it, I think, even with technology. Because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to pop this in and let's go with it. Because you don't have any depth, you don't have any champion, what specifically are you doing with it?
Yeah, Michelle?
I have a question for all of you guys. Do you envision a change in the composition of your staff as we move forward, as technology is going to more and more enable training and education? Do you see that there will have to be a change in the composition of your staff to better understand and uptake the technology for use in the fire service?
Yes. My staff is always changing, and they're at various phases within the span of control, because we are the Sunshine Retirement Home for the fire service. And most state training agencies you get them when they're about 48, 50, and they're on fire about a subject, and we're going to come in and we're going to train Oklahoma, or we're going to train Illinois, or Utah, or your state, and you get them in there, and then about 10 years they're wore out, and they've kind of run their deals, and so you've gotta be able to be thinking at our level, okay, who's the next guy coming up? And that comes back to what I initiated when I came on with the span of control. Because if you've got them broke down by 5, you've got several sub-coordinators at various stages of retirement or coming in or going out. And so they all filter back and forth, and it has allowed us to expand the breadth of what we do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, for us, I'm on that sunshine bus. So, and I'm probably going to be there about 5 more years, but I've hired other people that got on the bus too as well. And the beauty of it, in fact, the 2 individuals who are here today are in charge of our programs. And Russ Young, the guy who's back here, he works he has dual responsibilities. Works for us as an assistant director, but he also teaches for FAEAC. So he understands the technology side of it. So I have an inside track to that stuff. So the absolute answer to your question is yes. As I'm changing staff, I'm looking to get the right people on the bus to move us forward where we want to go organizationally.
So Indiana has LMS program that we use with ACADIS, our records management system, and we're starting to look at records management in one, RMS is one area and LMS is completely different. Sometimes we merge those 2 things together. But we decided we have 3 different tools in hiring employees in Indiana: full-time, intermittent staff, kind of seasonal, part-time, you could say, and then contractor. So we decided that we would shift our LMS to a contractor concept. I approached a university professor that is a content creator and then also manages LMS or teaches students for LMS. So we hired her as a contractor, the professor, but also her top student. So she has some incentive at the university that she can now find a pathway for the top student into a career, but we're only hiring that student as an intern. But we have the professor teaching her basically on our dime, but to create content in LMS. So we're shifting to try to maybe get away from the person who's maybe aging out of that process, if I can say that. So we are trying to use that contract concept with an intern that will be constantly coming and going, but the control is that professor. Just an idea that we started implementing a year ago.
PJ, you have a comment?
I do, so I'll add yes. And what I've been looking to do is traditionally, like it was mentioned, we hire instructors who are mid to later in their career because we look for them to have that fireground experience. Well, that's not necessarily capturing the instructors that we need for the technology piece. So looking at hiring younger instructors who maybe are earlier in their career and mentoring them in the other instructor modalities and programs that we have, but also putting them into some of these other programs, which so far is working out well. The challenge that I've had there is with the current instructor cadre, like, whoa, why are you hiring this guy? He's only been a firefighter for so long. He shouldn't be hired just yet, or she shouldn't be hired just yet. And explaining to them the succession planning, and that we need the next you, that we need to look not at today, but we also need to look at 5, 10, and 15 years down the road, and who's going to take over all of these positions, and getting those seasoned instructors to take the younger instructors under their wing and mentor them to what we need for now, but also for the future.
So I'm gonna say sorta, and the sorta is, we're a large operation. We've got about 850 to 900 instructors. They're all part-time. They're all hired, and they are the full spectrum of the fire service. And I don't pick anybody. The deputy directors don't pick anybody. It's the instructors that find students in class that they see characteristics that they believe will make them successful. With the basic instructors, that's the lowest level, assistant, associate, field staff. Basic instructors never work alone, and they're more of our stokers, but they're also there to support the environment for the instructor and to learn how everybody else teaches. And everybody can promote out based upon the support of their program manager. And nobody teaches anywhere they don't want to. The burn guys teaching burn, the hazmat guys teaching hazmat, the rope guys teaching rope, and they can mix it up, they can pick, but nobody has to teach everything. Nobody's gonna be a SME in all areas. And the people that have brought in the technology or the immersive learning, they brought it in. I didn't bring it in. I didn't say we need driving simulators. I didn't say we needed pump simulators. I didn't even say that we needed the roof props. The instructors came to me, and I tell them all the time, it's your job to tell me what you need. If you don't tell me what you need, I can't read your mind and I'm not gonna guess. But they figure out, or they see something somewhere, or they hear about something, and they get it, and or convince me to get it, and I find the money somewhere, sometimes. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but I let them run that. And like Caroline said, then they're passionate about it. And then we spend time getting them to understand it isn't how hot you can burn, or it isn't how hard you can make the student work. It's coupled back to solid curriculum, JPRs based upon standards, and even if it's not a certification class, it still goes back to JPRs for specific skills. And they know how that system works. The problem is some of my most passionate, the people that have all the jobs or have all the projects, they go and do silly stuff like get promoted or have kids or any number of things that take them away from me either permanently or for a while. So we have a constant churn of instructional staff throughout the organization, including the program management and the program directors. And that's the way it's been the whole time I'm here, and I plan for that. And we talk about succession planning, and we tell them that you have to find your replacement. I work to find my replacement. So that's the sort of.
Right.
Yeah. So who builds out your curriculum? I'll say immersive technology curriculum. And how do you operationalize that? So in other words, make it ubiquitous or consistent regardless of the instructor. And maybe that's a going to be done thing, but that strikes me, my observation is that strikes me as the gap.
Subject matter experts that generally have taken ownership of the project, along with our curriculum staff, our curriculum development staff, who know how curriculum has to be built and what it has to include, because the SMEs know what I'm supposed to teach or know what I want to teach, but you have to have people that keep them inside the box so they aren't, being the evil instructor, pushing them harder and harder and trying to make new people 5-year people and 5-year people chiefs, and keeping it all together.
So Danny has a question for the panel.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm going to articulate this very well or not, so kind of bear with me. Let me get some thoughts out, and then I'd just like your opinion, especially talking about blended programs and definition of success. Like, what does success look like to you? Is it just merely higher test scores, graduating students? And I'm speaking from the perspective of the NFFF. Is there a way to tie long-term reduction in firefighter injuries or line of duty death based on programs that you're offering now or based on technology? Can that be built into the mix somehow?
We're starting that in Oklahoma we just launched a brand new academy. And part of that academy, we're looking at how we can impact, because Oklahoma traditionally has been a top 5 state in every negative thing, along with all of our, and we're a top 5 states in all the disasters. So we have everything. The only thing we don't have in Oklahoma is a volcano, and it's one of those top 7 states. Yeah, we have all of it, from wind-driven fires to flooding, hurricane leftovers coming up the pipe, tornadoes, of course. It's not uncommon in a lot of states to have some of those scenarios. So what we do, we're taking a look at what it is. We're putting it in our curriculum. This is how many we lost last year. Next year, we're gonna try to do better and not lose as many citizens. You know, citizens first. Let's start there. And just start watching those ticks and paying attention. We do massive train the trainers. I have a career tech system that comes along beside me. So we develop the curriculum, and then we partner with career techs and sell programs throughout the state. And that's why, you know, we don't have as many firefighters as Illinois, but we deliver a lot of training throughout the state of Oklahoma through our partnerships. But we need to get those core basics out, and that's how we implement doing that. So we are looking at those national standards because, quite frankly, we're tired of it. We're tired of being in the top 5. And we hope that getting this amount of education out there through technology, because we are using the blended learnings, we're using the YouTube pages, we're using everything we could possibly throw at them to get it to be better, but still getting them to implement it into the SOPs and stuff. But we have a lot of challenges in the state itself, and we're addressing them at many levels, politically as well as even at the local level in jurisdiction. So I don't know, I think I kind of talked all around that. I don't know if I answered anything, but yes, we are looking at it and we're implementing it and we're hoping it goes down.
So it's an excellent question, and there's no easy answer. My students are not my employees. When I was at the fire department, it was easier to identify success because if you were unsuccessful, I showed you the door. But none of these people are my employees, and as a matter of fact, they're all going back to their home departments to be firefighters at the end of class, or at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, no matter what. So the initial benchmark is not complex, making them better than when they came in. Do I look and strive for higher test scores and passing and Pro Board, NIFSAC accreditation, and all of those kind of things? Absolutely. But with the kind of students that come to me, the full spectrum of people that from Chicago to places that have their apparatus in a pole barn with a dirt floor yet, and will never probably go inside because the 2 steel bottled SCBAs they can only fill it at the department in the next county. I have to prepare them the best that we can for what they're going to go back to today. So we look at student comments, and did they learn? Did they enjoy the class? Will they come back again? But we also look at scores and skills and performance sheets and all of the normal metrics that you think of somebody going to school.
So the last thing I would just add to that, Danny, your question is that, yeah, the stuff that these individuals have talked about, we've utilized. I mean, tactical worksheets, and when you're in a command training center, you know, utilizing that as, but we've never really gone into the world of this rubric, which I love. I think it's a refinement of what we're doing here. I subscribe to the theory. I had a city manager who used to tell me, you don't have to be sick to get better. This is where we can get better in the fire service, for sure, in evaluating our programs. So